Hi everyone. Hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can hear you too.
We have some people on watching the live stream, so this is a first for us. Thank you so much for coming and for the first edition of the DevTools Porto. I'm Marcelo from Reviewpad. It's our pleasure to start building or trying to build a community of developers and improving the lives of developers in the area here and also in Portugal and a bit more broad. Today we are going to talk about Backstage, and it's an exciting new, let's call it, product platform for helping developers to get up to speed. And so you'll see throughout the day or throughout the talks. And I'm not going to spend so much time. Just going to give the word to Vincenzo from Spotify, and we're going to hear about how Backstage makes developers happy at Spotify, and hope you enjoy. Thank you so much.
So hi, thank you for having me here. Sorry, I was like checking the microphone and so on. So I want to, first of all, I want to apologize for not being able to come there with all of you. I will have enjoyed a lot. So, all right, let's start. Hi, my name is Vincenzo, and I'm an engineer, originally from that island at the bottom of the map. I started my career in 2010 as a mobile engineer. And in 2015, I moved to Stockholm to work on a full stack JavaScript project. And since then, JavaScript has been my main focus. So I joined Spotify a year ago to work on Backstage. So my team focuses on Backstage open source, but also on the paid plugin offer bundle that we are aiming to ship this year. So during this talk, we'll start describing what Backstage is, and why it was created, and which problems we want to solve. And after that, I will present a demo of Backstage. And at the end, since we are between friends, I would like to share some secrets about how we use Backstage at Spotify. Okay, without losing any time, let's start talking about what the heck is Backstage. So Backstage is an open platform for building developer portals. And it was created at Spotify 6 years ago. And in March 2020, it was open sourced and donated to the CNCF. So technically, it isn't a Spotify product anymore. So why Spotify built? In 2016, Spotify was growing a lot. So the company went from having 1,300 plus engineers. And during that time, we noticed something interesting. So onboarding new engineers was taking more time than expected. And we had good metric for that. Specifically, we were measuring the number of days that the new engineers took to get to their 10th pull request. And that number was skyrocketing basically to 60 days. So we set out to prioritize developers and their experience, and that's why we created Backstage. So Backstage belongs to a fairly new product category called Developer Portal. You can see a Developer Portal as a single pane of glass that sits on top of your existing infrastructure. And it integrates with everything from your CI/CD tools, your monitoring tools, security tools, your testing tools, or all the software data that your team builds and manage. But also it integrates with the documentation for components, APIs, tutorial guides, org charts, everything. So all in one place, regardless of how or where the individual components are actually running. And I guess you recognize yourself in this slide. Ideally, each company would like to prioritize speed without compromising safety, scale without compromising quality, and also have some kind of ability to control the chaos that is going to be created in your organization. And Spotify wasn't different. We built Backstage to reach the best compromise between speed, scale, and case control, because you still want to give to the team a good amount of autonomy. There are a lot of features that Backstage could do. First of all, these are basically the main three. So the first one is that it lets you create software in seconds. So let's say you want to create a new component, a new website or service using Backstage. These are the steps that you have to do. You open Backstage, go to the templates page. A template page is like a collection of software pre-built by your organization. It could be like a Java service or a React application. So you select the templates, you press the create button, and that's it. Then you watch Backstage while create some logs and creates the repository, the service, the CI/CD pipelines, basic monitoring, tracing, and many other things. So literally, in a few seconds, you have a functioning service that runs somewhere. You don't know where, but you basically don't care. The important is that you're ready to implement your own logic. So the second use case is manage. So with Backstage, you can easily find all the software, perform operation directly from Backstage, like deploying new version or checking running version, logs, or have also under control data coming from external providers. And the last use case is explore. How many times in your organization you found repositories you didn't know existed, or you had no clue about what they were doing? With Backstage, you could have like an overview of all the components of your organization, visually trace the dependencies between components, check the details of each component, check who is the team responsible for that specific component, who are the members belonging to that team, and all of this in a single place, and always by having all the documentation accessible to you. And we believe that the success of Backstage is due to its plugin architecture. So when you bootstrap a new Backstage application, what you get is basically something that is ready to be customized. And you customize your Backstage application by installing plugins. Plugins are essentially additional functionality to make your Backstage application useful for your company. You could install them from NPM, for example, or you could create your own private plugins in case, I don't know, maybe some functionalities are very tied to your organization. All right, without talking anymore, let's directly jump into a demo. So this is demo.backstage.com, and you could reach this website. It's available. And what you see is basically what you get when you create a new Backstage application locally. So currently, you are seeing the software catalog, which is the most important functionality of the platform. Right now, it's already populated with some entities just to let you showcase all different functionalities. So software catalog is a centralized system that keeps track of ownership and metadata for all the components in your ecosystem. Like, for example, let me zoom a bit. For example, services, website, library, but also many other things, so like groups, users, APIs, and so on. And you could have some filters here. So just to let you explore all the components in your organization, like you could filter by owner, select a team, or a user, or by tags, for example. Or you could just view all the components present in your organization by pressing this all button. Sorry, it looks a bit weird because I had to zoom a bit the website. So let me show how it looks, a specific component. So here we have a list of components. Let's grab the first one, artist lookup. So on the left panel, actually it's not the left panel, it's on the top now. So in this panel, you can see some metadata. You have some here. You have some. You can see that this is a component of type service. Some tags, like it has a Java type, Java tag. Maybe it's a Java service. Belongs to the system called Artist Engagement Portal. So you have some information about that, about the service. You could visually track the dependencies between other external components. So, for example, artist lookup depends on a database called ArtistDB, but it also like kind of expose some API to others. Like, for example, this component called www.artist consumed some APIs exposed by artist lookup. So maybe there is some endpoint that it's used by www.artist component. And yeah, you could also view the entire graph in your organization just to see where it's positioned, a specific component in your entire infrastructure. And here you could just navigate between all the entities. So, for example, let's say that you maybe you own this artist lookup, but you don't know anything about www artist. So what you do is just press the item, land on a specific entity page, and here you have all the information about the service. So you have like the CI/CD tools here, dev entities, documentation, but maybe you want to like continue exploring this website, this component. You can see that it's of type website and it's owned by team A. So if you want to know more about the team A, you press this button and you land on the team page. You can see that there are 4 members that belongs to the team, and this team owns 4 services, a website, and 3 APIs. And you could continue, like, for example, the APIs, let's explore. You could just explore the APIs and actually invokes also the APIs directly from Backstage. So here you have all the endpoints. You could just fill in all the parameters and invoke the endpoints without like going on another external system. So what else do we have? Documentation. So we have a specific plugin called TechRadar. TechDocs. And TechDocs it's used for kind of create documentation within Backstage. So, for example, you write with TechDocs, you basically write documentation as a code. So you write markdown files, but then your markdown is kind of rendered inside Backstage. So you have all the kind of the markdown features, for example, the list, all the different like section and so on. You could have like images, or you could have like, I don't know, snippets of codes. You could copy the code and so on. Other interesting plugins, we have like TechRadar, just to map the technologies used by your organization. And another interesting plugin, this is more interesting from a kind of business perspective, is called Cost Insights. And this is basically, it helps you like visualize, understand, and optimize your cloud cost. So Cost Insight plugin shows your daily cost data for a team, trends over time, comparison between metrics you care about, and so on. So this was a quick overview about what you get when you bootstrap a new Backstage application and what you can get with Backstage. But now, as a promise, let me show you what you get when you actually customize your Backstage instance. In particular, I would like to demo our internal instance of Backstage, the one that we use as Spotify. So this is the open source version of Backstage, customized with 150 plus plugins, plus some tweaks in the UI. You might see that it looks a bit different. So the first feature we all like is how to bootstrap a new component within Backstage. So on the left menu, you press like the let me zoom a bit, the create button, new component, and you land basically on this page where you have a bunch of like templates. Could be like a Java library, a Spring Boot service, but also could be other things like data endpoints, or I don't know, data science tool, websites, or documentation, for example. So let's grab one. Let's select the Java library. So I select this template, fill in my new component ID, I don't know, DevTools Porto, something, description, press the next button, select the owner, select the repository location, check some compliance check. And then, once I press this component, basically Backstage Bootstrap create everything. So we create a repository, the ICD pipeline, and your service will be running somewhere in the cloud. So yeah, that's cool. Another interesting view I would like to show is the manage view. So here you can see all the components owned by my team, like security issues, cost insight, together with all the services, websites, and other things that we own. So let's grab something like meaningful, so like a website. So this one, for example, Backstage Spotify.com. Let me zoom a bit. So this website is actually this one. So this is how it looks in production. And this is it's a representation of Backstage. So you have your active deployments. You could see all the deployments here. You have you can spot that there are some pods running in Asia, in different regions like Asia, Europe, US. These are like Kubernetes pods. And yeah, you have different things like you could redeploy like a different version. You could deploy a different version. Let's say you want to roll back or you want to redeploy the current one. And then you have other things like CI/CD here. So here you see all the builds. So this build passed, this failed. You could go deeper and check why this failed by just looking at the logs. All the logs are directly here. Yeah, and so on. Another among the most loved features is auto-tune. So let me show this. So this plugin is actually used for properly certifying components by giving you some badges. So it's kind of a gamification thing. So for example, this website passed the security tier 2 checks. So you can see the checks here, but it didn't pass the test certified track. Actually, it used to be test certified, but maybe something failed. Yeah, you see, an hour ago, this specific check failed. So basically, we lost the badge. So this is like, this is something really cool that we all love it. And there are many other plugins. This is like a very wild experiment where you could run A/B tests in production data or machine learning stuff. But I would like to conclude this demo by showing you some documentation, in particular our golden path. So this is like our hub for documentation. Everything is in one place. So a golden path is a tutorial where you learn how to do things at Spotify or in your organization within Backstage. This is the first thing every new hire does when they start at Spotify. And they are divided into different section categories like backend, data engineering, or machine learning, and so on. So just select the backend one, for example. So let me zoom it down. So here you have different steps. So that goes from configuring your local environment to developing your backend service to do some troubleshooting on your service. And the golden path is really, really a game changer. So by following them, a new hire basically could just be up and running in just a day. And it could happen that also during the onboarding process, or while just viewing documentation of a specific component, you spot some errors. In case you do, you could just propose new changes by selecting the text you want to change and press the button. This will basically open a GitHub issue already compiled with the text that you have selected. So I hope you enjoyed this. But now let's go back to the slides. Since I want to tell you about a few core philosophies together with some tips for being successful with Backstage. So the first concept is interface. Backstage rarely is the source of truth. So Backstage is an aggregator. So if you use many infrastructure tools, you should continue using those tools. So Backstage is not here for being used instead of current CI/CD tools that you are using it. So instead, it's here to expose all those tools through the same interface. The second concept I want to talk about is autonomy, which is kind of the real secret to reach the level we have achieved at Spotify with Backstage. So the core of Backstage, the internal version of Backstage, the one I just demoed, is managed by a team of 5 people. But the 150 plus plugins you see in our instance aren't developed by those people, since this would be impossible. So instead, they are created and maintained by over 100 other teams who own that domain of expertise. So for example, the plugin for the build system, the one that shows the status of the current builds, is provided by the team that owns the build system. And that really worked for us, because not only you could kind of grow much faster, but because you're not kind of relying on a single team to develop all these things. And oftentimes it's actually better that the team who owns the problem to be closer to, which is closer to the problem, to build the plugin instead of another team who knows nothing about the problem. And the last concept is ownership. So we believe that the team who creates each piece of software should be responsible for maintaining the metadata around that piece of software. And that's it. So thank you for listening. I hope this could have given you the opportunity to understand more about Backstage. Here I dropped a few links. The first one is our open source repository. The second one is our website with all documentation. And the third one is our portal where you have all things community, from our Discord server to our monthly community sessions. And there is also my handle, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear us. A lot of clapping here, so I think it was very enjoyable. We have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. I don't know if anyone has a question here. Maybe Adrian, you can check if anyone is doing a question online. No one has a question so far. Oh, yeah, question. Just gonna give you. Yeah.
Hi, Vincenzo. Thank you for showing us Backstage. You mentioned you can integrate into other sources of truth. For those integrations, is the expectation that we would utilize existing plugins? And if we're using a non-standard source of truth, would that plugin need to be built by us?
Yeah, this is a good question. So if you visit our repository, there are actually a lot of plugins that have been developed by the community. So I would say, like, most likely, if there is something available, I would recommend to use the plugin that was developed by the community. There are really a tons of example about like all the commons, like kind of services. So I think if it's something very like kind of a service that is very used worldwide, I think it's easy that most likely the plugin there is a plugin available. But otherwise, if it's like a system that you own, like something very private, there are Backstage could give you all the tools to develop and ingest the data inside the catalog. So yeah.
Got it.
I can drop you a few links if you want that describe how to do that if you're interested.
Sure. If that's in the documentation, I'll browse and I should be able to find it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? I think it was.
So hi, Vincenzo. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was really excited. I have actually a curiosity, but you're saying that you started this. I mean, Spotify started all this Backstage thing because onboarding was taking a lot of time. So I actually was curious about that. So do you know from where you started and what is the numbers right now? And actually, what is the feedback from the people that arrive at Spotify and go through all Backstage? Because to be honest, I never saw a version of Backstage from Spotify. Even for me, that I know that Backstage is actually a way to aggregate everything. I found that is even a lot of amount of things even inside your own Backstage, which makes a lot of sense and somehow. But I was curious about that time and what is the feedback from those new incomers? How do they feel about that? Thanks.
Yeah. So the number of days for onboarding new engineers, I think now is kind of very under control. So it doesn't take so much time. Actually, I can't tell you about how it was at that time since I wasn't working for Spotify, but I could give you my experience about when I started like working for Spotify a year ago. So I can tell you that I was up and running in one day. So in one day, I basically created my service and developed some features on my service, integrated my service with other services, consume other services that were running in the Spotify infrastructure. But also, I was able to expose my service in production by changing the DNS in production. And I did this through Backstage because we have a specific plugins that help you in doing that in very safe way. So yeah, that is my experience. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I feel this kind of a golden path. So having this kind of like tutorial where you explain all things about your organization is really a game changer.
All right.
Thanks, Ramesh. Sorry.
Go ahead.
There's a question from a member of our online audience. Ramesh asked, is the cost insights you demoed private or available for public to use?
It's open source. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Let's thank Vincenzo once more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, do I need to do anything, or it will just go? All right. All right. So it's good. It's good. So next up, we'll have Levi Ferreira from Zalando, and he's going to talk about the starting point for developers at Zalando, powered by Backstage. Are we?
Vincenzo, don't forget to stop sharing.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
Okay, cool, because I cannot see what I'm presenting. Cool. So thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Levi. I'm representing Zalando here today. I want to talk a little bit about Sunrise, which is our product internally that we use based on Backstage. So then maybe you can see a little bit about what Vincenzo was talking about on what is out of the box and what is not, but also that you can see a little bit on real life. How does it look like? As I said, my name is Levi. I'm currently responsible for the developer productivity team here at Zalando, which is a team of consists of like four different teams that work on different areas of CI/CD, of collaborating and creating code. The developer portal, which is what we call Sunrise internally, and also on knowledge management on the parts of APIs, dependencies, software, metadata, and so on. Before joining Zalando 2 years ago, I was part of Shopify and Rocket Internet before that. And I was also the engineer manager responsible for the implementation of Backstage in Zalando before taking more responsibilities. Who doesn't know, Zalando is a fashion company, and we are the starting point for fashion, and that's our mission for Europe. In the last few years, we've been leading the fashion market in Europe with more than 14 billion GMV, with more than 48 million active customers utilizing the platform in different areas of clothing, footwear, accessories, beauty, and reaching more than 17,000 employees in Europe, with different areas of fashion, including the fashion store itself, but also outlets, lounge, the marketing services, the fulfillment solutions, and so on and so on. We have 5 tech hubs in Europe, spread around that in Switzerland, in Germany, in Finland, and also in Ireland. And we have more than 2,000 employees involved on the process of building software, and in more than 200 different cross-functional delivery teams. And this is how our application landscape looks like. We have more than 4,000 applications running on production with its different components and different resources on the infrastructure. So our mission with Sunrise is to basically be the starting point for builders or the developers or anyone involved on the process of being involved of developing software. So if you think you consider yourself someone involved on the process of building software, you are our customers in a sense of we want to build the product internally for our Zalando employees. So before we actually talk about what exactly is Sunrise, Sunrise came from a previous interaction over the old developer console that we had internally, which was what we use for maintaining and operating all those kind of services and documentation and resources. And it was a technology built in-house by Zalando called Mosaic that was also used on the internal the fashion store and also some other softwares that we had in the company. But we actually decided to move away from the previous developer console in 2019 before even Spotify open source Backstage. So when we did that decision and then Backstage open up their source code with the open source version, we decided to jump straight ahead into the boat, and we were probably one of the first adopters of Backstage. Because of the value that the platform would give, which was easy to onboard new people, easily composable, easily shareable components, and also a better and more modern standard on the software practices. So Sunrise is, as I said, the daily start point for builders or software engineers, data engineer, managers, appliance scientists, data scientists, stakeholders like project, program managers, product managers. And by daily start point, we mean that we want to see every single one of these people utilizing Sunrise every day to solve problems for their customers. And the problems that we are solving are related to the discoverability and usability of the software to basically reduce the complexity in the tooling and the knowledge landscape that people have to handle on every day, as very similar as Vincenzo was talking about before. So the question is, how do we do that? Yeah, so we centralize every single tooling, resources, information into our instance of Backstage in a way that is consistent, in a way that is also accessible, in a way that is also beautiful, yeah, and also gives a little bit of identity to the platform. So that's why we also don't call internally Backstage, but we call it some. And as Vincenzo said as well, the key has been that we are also not the ones that build every single tooling and every single plugin that is on the platform. It's actually, we have internally the concept of the multi-sided platform, where actually people contribute with plugins and other kinds of integrations in a way that is not just like a plugin here and a plugin there, but in a way that is interoperable and easy to use. So far, like, let's see, how do we measure success on that, right? Like, because we talked a little bit about Backstage, Vincenzo talked a little bit about that. I talked a little bit of the concepts in the platform, but how do we measure success? So we have basically 3 KPIs that we look at. We look at the active users daily, the weekly active users, and the share of tooling integrated in Sunrise or in our instance of Backstage. And in the last few weeks, we had our all-time high of 38% of the whole engineering community or the builders utilizing Sunrise every day, 71% utilizing every week, and around 40% of the tooling landscape integrated in Sunrise, which is still very far away from our goal of having everything integrated, because we have a very similar vision as Spotify, in that sense that we want to see every single tooling need integrated, every resource integrated. But we started with 0%, and we are quite on a good track. And 40% means something around 28 to 30 different plugins integrated. And we are also surpassing the amount of users utilizing Sunrise every month. So basically, people outside of those job families that I told you, they are also utilizing our instance of Backstage or Sunrise on a monthly basis. So this is how it looks a little bit on our Sunrise platform. So first here you can see the homepage. So the homepage is divided in 2 sections. One is a little bit more about description, some accelerate metrics, how has been the productivity of your teams, and the left section more in terms of actionable items, things like your latest pipeline activities, your open pull requests that are requiring some review from you, or GitHub issues that are open, or vulnerabilities that were found recently, or even things like, for example, access to clusters and things like that, which would pop up to you as something that we plan as well to have. But we want to have here basically a section where it's like, this is the place where you go every day, and that you look at it and like, okay, something new popped up, I need to act, and then there is an easy way to act on those things. We have a few different things in the platform. So you can see, for example, we call internally our components, we have a different terminology from Backstage, where we call our systems applications. We have also APIs, we have documentations, we have teams, we have the product portfolio. We have some Cyber Week related plugins because we are an e-commerce platform. So it's important that we also have some sort of central place to get information about Cyber Week. But we also have our machine learning platform, our CI/CD pipelines, and some extra functionalities running there. And we also have search. So for example, if you're looking for something around documentation or applications or people or APIs, you can search on our search, and this would give us the most relevant resources related to your search. So you can search through all the landscape in Zalando. So, for example, if you look at, if you search, you can search an application, but you can also search API, and that would lead you towards the API plugin that Vincenzo presented to you. And then, like, for example, for the applications page, you can see here a little bit that we also have some sort of customization in comparison with what Vincenzo showed. We have a few extra things, like, for example, the tags, which are basically the automated understanding of languages, and also some things like, for example, production readiness reviews or application scoring that we also present here on the application page. And then once you go to the application detail page, you have a very similar view here as Vincenzo showed before. But you can also see that we have some resources around telemetry and on-call resources like monitoring or logs and traces from open tracing or links to incident handling documentation, but also the recent anomalies that you had on the system. So basically, like, I don't know, a database was down for a few seconds, or a server or one of the clusters was down for a few servers related to that application. Or similar things like that, which are related more to monitoring. And then you can also see here that we have one information that you have not seen on Vincenzo's presentation, which is the less synced data, because we learned, as well as Vincenzo said, that we don't use Backstage as the source of truth for data, but there are some workers and some that basically get that processes the information for us in an automated way. Then we also have our CI/CD system, which is here on the CI/CD tab, and you can see all the components, or basically all the pipelines related to this application, and what are the status, and so on and so on. And you can also see more details of those. And these are basically like more contextualized CI/CD, as Vincenzo showed as well, something very similar. But you can also go straight to the CI/CD main project, and then you can see all the pipelines that are running in production, or all the pipelines that are running in the company. You could also observe them here, or even filter them here and select them. And then once you select them, you go to the visualization of the pipeline, where you can see the deployments, and you can see also the logs and the artifacts, or the S3 artifacts that are generated by your pipelines, or the Kubernetes deployments that happen in production, or in testing environments, or anything that you are triggering on your pipeline. I showed a little bit about the search and documentation, and I think Vincenzo also showed a few things on documentation. So we also have the documentation plugin from MKDocs and Backstage, and the experience is fully integrated on the Sunrise platform as well, with a central point for finding documentation sites, as we call them, or documentation clusters in a sense, through search or through browsing. One thing that I also want to show is the dependencies between APIs and applications. So this is something that today we basically have services that understands which APIs are published to production, and then we leverage the data from open tracing, from monitoring, to basically discover APIs and dependencies, and also to discover dependencies between applications, which is a little bit different, for example, from the normal Backstage definition, where you define those dependencies on your metadata. Here in Zalando, we discover all of that out of the box, so that you don't have to do that by yourself. Another thing that I want to show is the Nakadi events, or the event streaming. So here, for example, on this application, you can see the published events that this application provides, but also the consumed events that the application is consuming. What are the costs for those events? How much are they spending in terms of traffic, but also what's their event rate? How many events are being executed per second? And this, again, is all automated by our internal systems in Zalando, where basically we tag those events into our event streaming service, and then we can then surface this data in Sunrise or in Backstage. Then I would also like to show a little bit about teams. Yeah, so you can see here like a little bit about the teams. I think Vincenzo showed that as well, so I will not go too much into details. But it's what is also interesting is that we also have some categorizations in terms of ownership, where you can see 24/7 relevant applications, or Cyber Week relevant applications, or even applications that would require some sort of immediate action. And then you can go to the user profile page and see also which are the teams that is under this person's responsibility, which teams are this person part of, and also who are the lead of the person, what do they do, how can they reach out to the person, which is also being used quite a lot internally. Then in terms of application creation, we also have the create flow, very similar with what Vincenzo showed as well on Spotify. The only difference here that we have basically is that we have our own service for generating our application templates. And that so basically the visualization is very similar as Spotify's and Backstage, but we have our own implementation of that because we already had those services before in Zalando, even before we started implementing Backstage. So it wouldn't make sense that we would rewrite our software to utilize the open source. But there is something that we plan to take a look into more details as well in the future. So you would go and you would select which are, for example, if I would create a Java application, I would come here, I would choose who is the owner, what is the GitHub repository that is going to be created. And once you're submitting this, it creates completely the service in production on our production clusters deployed. And then you can simply focus on the business logic and not much on how to deploy and how to set up your pipelines or how to create the bootstrap or how to bootstrap your application. And we have a very similar thing as well for machine learning projects. I cannot dive into much of the details of the machine learning part because that's also quite a little bit sensitive, but I showed to you a little bit about how does a machine learning pipeline looks like. You can create machine learning pipelines directly from the platform as well, and creating machine learning projects. You can also have shared notebooks between pipelines, and you can also collaborate through machine learning projects. So it's not just about creating code and then pushing that to GitHub, but it's also some other things are also happening through the platform. So you can see here, for example, the results of a machine learning pipeline, but unfortunately I cannot show much more than that. We have a few other things that I want to show that are a little bit disconnected from the whole Backstage thing, but that we also find quite important. The first thing is our product portfolio. So we also have a portal where we give one plugin where we give clarity to our Zalando employees. What are the products that we offer centrally, and who are the teams responsible for those products, and what stage are they in? Are they very similar with the tech radar? Are they adoptable? Should people utilize those services? Should people not utilize those services? This is also quite available here for everybody to discover, and also support, because we also learned that that it was quite hard for us to understand, like, okay, how do I get support for this product, or how do I get support for this workflow on data or on software engineering? How do I create, I don't know, how do I create a Kubernetes cluster, or how do I debug this CI/CD pipeline that is broken? You can find all the information how to reach the central teams directly on the support page, and this is probably one of the most used plugins every day internally Zalando. I think not the most used. The homepage is coming first, and then the catalog, and I think this probably top five plugins in Sunrise. We also, Vincenzo talked a little bit about the tech radar, so I would not go into much details, but it's integrated with our documentation as well. And I would also like to share a little bit about our challenges and learnings on our journey on adopting Backstage. I think some of the challenges that we had was that the team was very small and quite unfamiliar with TypeScript. And also, when on the stages that we were on Backstage back then, in 2020, it was quite difficult because there was heavily changes into the APIs, which involved like refactoring some code and re-implementing a few things, like, for example, authentication, where we had to re-implement authentication, I think 2 or 3 times when we started adopting Backstage. So there was like a lot of thrown away code and some workarounds that we had to do temporarily. But I think most of those challenges were basically because we were on early stages of the platform of Backstage, and I think most of them now I see quite a bit of stability into the APIs and the code itself. So what helped? Backstage community was extremely helpful. Whenever we needed support, whenever we had questions, whenever things were not working, whenever we didn't know where to start, the community was just like really supportive and helpful. And I really appreciate that. So that's why I think I put that in first on what helped. The second thing was basically making sure that our entities, our plugins, our core APIs were solid enough, and there was some sort of abstraction so that we were not relying too much on the core specs of Backstage. But again, this was very helpful because it was like early stages of the process. Another thing that helped quite a lot was that when we decided to utilize Backstage, we came in with a goal. We want to integrate this and this tooling. We want to have this and this functionalities for our MVP. This is when we are going to deliver our MVP. This is how we're going to do this. And this is the value that we are going to bring to our customers, to our internal customers in Zalando. And we felt that it would be very... It would be very difficult in a sense of like Backstage has a lot of plugins. It has a lot of progress happening while you are doing things. And if we wouldn't have those goals and if we wouldn't have those achievables, we might have lost ourselves into that. So having that clear goal of what we want to achieve was very helpful. And another thing that was very helpful is that some bugs, we didn't have to fix it because whenever we found them out, the community was already fixing them, which is always valuable. And I saw many cases on the documentation plugin, for example. What we learned, so we learned that like with certain with Backstage specifically, having a small central team, we could still deliver a lot of value utilizing the platform, even though in the beginning we didn't had as many contributors as Vincenzo had, where he has like 100 and something teams supporting or contributing to Backstage internally. We started with 5 people, and these were the core contributors to the Sunrise portal. And then with time, we started getting more contributors from other teams. And we're still on the journey. I think so far, my last data was that we had internally 35 or 36 different people contributing to the platform in around 10 different teams in different areas. But that was like very important and very useful that we used Backstage as well, that we could still, even without those contributions, these overwhelming contributions, we could still deliver a lot of value. We also learned that we should go from a trust-first approach and basically assuming good intent from whoever is contributing, assuming that that they might not know what they're contributing for. In our case, we didn't know the technologies around Backstage, which was TypeScript and JavaScript. We were not so familiar with it. So it was really good to have like this kind of like trust-first approach, especially when infrastructure teams are also contributing to the platform. They might not be front-end experts, and having that said, I think they might not be supposed to be front-end experts as well. And having the framework or having Backstage there to support us into that was also really helpful. Having contribution guidelines as well and ownership. And the last one, the learning that we had was basically introducing quality gates for the metadata so that we could ensure that the quality of the data was still relevant, that we would not have that many problems with, like components or applications that are there, but nobody knows what the status is. But having some quality gates on different parts of the developer journey can be helpful and can help us to maintain a healthier metadata quality. In our case, we introduced like quarterly application reviews where teams are basically reviewing the status of their applications, but also what is their tiers, are those applications covered with by 24/7 and some other enriching things that we basically validate if those things are up to date, if those things are maintained, and if the application is still relevant for the team or not. I think that's it from my side. So I think I might have gone over time. So, but I hope we still have some time for questions.
Thank you, Levi. We have time for one question. Yeah, maybe I can just give you the.
Hi, Levi. Thank you so much. I wonder how you manage environments. Does your Backstage knows about your application environments? Does it know about staging in production, or does it just knows about the application itself?
It doesn't know necessarily application or staging. It knows about the application itself.
Okay.
Because I think some teams might have more than one staging environment.
Okay. Let's thank Levi. Thank you again. All right, and next we have Carl J. Aworth from American Airlines, and he's going to talk about, well, the title is Batteries Included, Developer Experience at American Airlines.
All right, let me get my screen shared. All right, I'm Carl Hayworth. I'm the product technical lead for developer experience products and principal engineer. So at American Airlines, we're at a little bit different state than the last two companies. We've never had an internal developer platform, and we've been really used to swivel chairing tickets. We've had infrastructure teams and application teams at different points of skill sets for DevOps journeys. And with Runway, we're trying to work to skill all those different teams up between application and infrastructure teams. So this is the homepage of Runway, our Backstage implementation. We went through quite a few different looks for it until we settled on the right one. But to jump into some history first, so we realized the need for a Runway-like platform with our coaching organization. Our coaching organization used to use Yeoman to create different templates for our customers internally to use, and we found that there was a lot of repetition and a lot of the same problems happening time and time again. So they created their own templates with Yeoman. When the pandemic hit, the coaching organization, they were really used to doing a lot of coaching in person and working with people in the hangar, as we call it, at our headquarters. And now all of a sudden they had to shift to virtual coaching, and they weren't used to that. So while the rest of the coaching organization was getting up to speed on exactly what that would look like for virtualized coaching, two of the coaches decided to find the proper developer portal that could be built on for American Airlines needs. So those two individuals, they continued to enhance their Yeoman templater. And then when Backstage came out to the community, I believe it was in March or April of 2020, the team saw that, dug into what it offered, and it covered the Create plugin as the previous demos have shown, and that served a lot of the needs that they were looking for templating. On top of that, we also had a big push for our application teams to go into the cloud and to become more modern with DevOps practices. Well, the cloud and security can keep up any CIO in the middle of the night thinking about when we're going to make the news next. So Runway is also driven by the need to perform safe and efficient deployments at scale. So we had a few first iterations. The team was built up around the two first initial coaching individuals, and then we continued down the journey to make deploying to the cloud even easier. So we came up with the goal of creating a delightful self-service developer experience, a one-stop shop for all of our IT needs. Previously, and still a bit to this day, we have manual ticketing systems that teams will fill out forms with. They have way too many fields with sometimes duplicate information or information we can grab from other platforms. And then a bunch of teams swivel chair behind the scenes entering the information. There's some communication back and forth with some meetings, of course, and then eventually we'll have delivered services through those service request forms. But usually that's not it. Teams have to get multiple different service requests in order to get out to our non-production or production environment and have an application running on the web. We wanted to turn workflows and automation to reduce the swivel chairing of the manually fulfilled tickets, and we wanted to provide those reproducible patterns for our applications that our coaching team already recognized that we needed. So we continued to develop Runway. We continued to develop the overall workflow of what it took to get out to our cloud environment. We started off analyzing what teams were doing, what their workflow patterns were, what their hosting patterns were, and we built on top of that. We quickly found out that some of what we were doing between the app hosting PaaS services with our cloud providers just weren't cutting it, weren't being able to satisfy our needs at scale. So we had a couple different platform changes going from something like Jenkins to GitHub Actions, GitHub On-Prem to GitHub Cloud, and then looking at things like app services and Beanstalks, more to Kubernetes. So our team was really there trying to drive what the direction was going forward to make things easier and to manage things at greater scale. So as we come in to create a new component, this is very similar to the last two demos as well. We have a bunch of available templates. We have a certified section, although I really like the golden path that was shown previously as well. So I think we'll get some tips from that. One thing that we've introduced that's a little custom to American is you'll see a couple of these detail drawers here. We're still working on the final implementation, but when we click on it, we can go ahead and see different items that what we call our battery included items right out of the box. So we deploy to a Kubernetes platform, hosting platform. We give teams service mesh with service discovery out of the box. We've got multi-region ready with our GTM providers. So we've developed custom automation that sits as an operator in our Kubernetes environment to reach out to our GTM providers when our new ingresses come up. We automatically introduce API security management for teams that choose to utilize that particular provider. We have other ways of providing security management as well, but we have a nice, easy drop-in interface where teams with our operator can say, I want to be up behind the API management security suite, and then our service mesh and operator reroute traffic behind the scenes without our teams having to know about it. As mentioned previously, abstraction layers, that's one of the things not only Runway and the Backstage system provides, but that's one of the main goals that our team also tries to implement is abstraction layers to make things easier for our customers so they don't have to think about the systems actually performing the work behind the scenes. So there's a lot of other items in here. Teams can click on details. These are all customizable on what shows up behind each template. So if a template author from our inner source community decides to contribute a template, but it might not include all of these best practices, they can still point that out to teams as far as what's missing and what still needs to be done. We have also provided these little chips next to them showing what security items we automatically take care of. We have a concept of the baker's dozen internally, which are 13 different security principles that our teams must implement to prove that they are safely operating in any of our environments. So these baker dozen chips help teams identify what is taken care for them and what they might still have to do. There are other templates we have that don't quite take care of all these baker dozen items. So we wanted to make sure we point that out to application teams. When I continue down, one thing we've worked on a lot here at American Airlines recently with one of our larger coaching engagements in our hangar, which I'll get to more in a little bit here, is around being able to merge or layer on multiple templates together. So one of the previous templates that I showed was a Python Fast API service here that'll deploy to our Kubernetes environment. It also has optional Azure PaaS services that can be launched with Terraform as well. So with those different, and I'll show different UI options as well that we've got baked in here in a moment. But what we've got here is we've got our Python Fast API template that's coming from the local repository that this template's defined in. But another more powerful option we can have is we can have multiple of these fetch template actions where we can pull files and template them out from other repositories as well. So you can see from here, we're pulling from a repo metadata repo to pull some sort of skeleton file and template it out. And as we come down a little further, we do have to format names for Azure in some cases because there's different limitations. So we drop some characters, convert things to lowercase as needed. But then for things like where we're adding Postgres flexible server, some Terraform for that, we can drop it in only if the user selects that's what they want. We are still working and iterating through these templates, trying to make them the best that they can be through the reuse and deduplication of code. So we're learning new tips and tricks through the Backstage scaffolding system every day. But this makes it easy where we can layer multiple things on top of each other. And then when a team goes through the create app process, not only do they get application code to get started from, but they also get a Docker image deployed to our private registry. They get that Docker image deployed to our Kubernetes environment, and they get some supporting infrastructure as well. So they don't have to go set up Postgres, Cosmos, storage accounts, key vaults, whatever the case might be. Separately, they can use a single template with multiple things baked in that have already been certified from our organization. As I continue forward, one other thing is part of our templating system that is offered by Backstage. I keep saying ours, but we're built on the back of giants, and the Backstage community has helped us a ton, as mentioned, with things like bug fixes, things that we would have never thought of. We did for quite a while because we were an early adopter as well of the Backstage platform. We did accumulate quite a bit of technical debt. And in that technical debt, we also held on to the original Golang scaffolder for a very, very long time. We only shed that this year and not too long ago. So a lot of the functionality that we've been requesting and we kind of needed and built into our own Golang version of the scaffolder, Backstage and Spotify and the community have delivered. And one of those delivery items that I'm selecting here, highlighting here, is the ability to create custom scaffolder actions. So not only, where I'll show you here in a moment, do we have custom field extensions for the templating system that are easily defined in YAML, we also have easy to define scaffold actions here. So if anyone's familiar with Argo CD, the GitOps platform, we don't require any of our teams to have continuous deployment files or workflows in their produced repos. Argo CD, and previously mentioned too, our customers for the most part don't know at any given time where their application is deployed to. They can find that in Runway. And the benefit is that we can swap out clusters behind the scenes. And because of Argo CD is watching a particular path in the produced repo, and then anytime there's updates, it'll go ahead and apply those changes. So we were able to create a custom scaffolder action that uses Argo CD for continuous deployment, integrate that into the Backstage Create plugin very easily without modifying a bunch of the code. And in addition to that, we do like to give back when we're able to. Our Argo CD scaffolder action has been contributed back to open source. It's available on NPM. We've contributed back to the Rody organization. Rody created the initial Argo CD catalog plugin, and we've been building on top of it ever since. So we have contributed that back as well. But I'm going to show you, I do have a couple screens pulled up already, but I'm going to show you our Create plugin and that Python Fast API application. We've got, as previously shown by the last two demos, we do have a couple sections here that I'm going to leave off for now. A little bit more sensitive information up here and boring information in the repo information section. But under deployment information, we did create this custom field extension here. It's kind of big, but this is the UI we previously had before we moved to the new scaffolding system recently. And we have a UI where a user can select their cluster, and then based on cluster, they can also select their namespace. As previously mentioned, the Backstage or runway system, in this case, doesn't hold on to this data. We're simply reaching out to other areas in the American Airlines ecosystem to get this information. And that's one really powerful item that the custom field extensions can provide, is it can fetch data over APIs that you can't normally do just through the normal YAML defined field. So everything for the templating system can be done with YAML. However, for more powerful actions, more powerful fields, that's where you're going to have to turn to React and TypeScript. As I continue through here, there's specific information about securing my deployed endpoint with a micro API proxy, creating a public ingress, other information related to my application. As I continue through, and I didn't want any authentication to timeout, so again, cooking show magic to make sure everything's populated here. This is a preview into what we've just developed in one of our hangar sessions, which I'll explain more here in a couple minutes. But adding the ability to have additional PaaS services, doing it very easily, that's kind of the American Airlines flavor added on top, by being able to select your subscription, your vertical, your primary region, should update that title to say primary, your environment. And in this case, we even offer our developers the ability to create those service principals, resource groups, and associate them together. Another custom scaffolding action and custom field extension option as well. In here, teams can then choose. Again, we only have one option selected. We've got many more in the pipeline right now going through our hangar exercise. But teams can then select what they want for their options. More options will be coming, I'm sure. And then we go ahead and stack those different repo templates on top of each other, fill in the details. When we click next step, we will see all the checkboxes get checked off. Some of them will take a little bit longer, like our Azure type resources, and some of them are a little quicker. In this case, we've developed additional custom scaffolding options for things like creating GitHub environments, uploading secrets to GitHub environments, and I think those are pretty much the primary ones, in addition to the Azure related ones as well, and formatting names. So just as shown in some of the other demos, we now have a GitHub repo. One thing we've done in our actions, in our templates, is we trigger actions for building the Docker image, because one of the scaffold actions that was taken was creating Argo CD resources. That's going to be our continuous deployment platform for GitOps. So our Kubernetes cluster, when these apps are created through the Create plugin, Argo CD is already trying to pull that image from our internal repository or internal registry. That image isn't yet created yet, but it's still trying, and it's going to continue to try until it's successful. So that's why we kick off the build Docker image, and as part of our strategy, we have a storage account created for Terraform state files as well. Unfortunately, you can't create Terraform state files typically with Terraform. So in this case, with just those Terraform state storage account locations, we kick that off and create that if it doesn't already exist. We do also, because I selected a Postgres Terraform, Postgres database through Terraform, we do have the ability to execute Terraform plan and Terraform apply right away, making it easy for our teams to launch those different PaaS type services. If I continue on, we are using the catalog. We've got tons of items under experimental, too many to show. We've got plenty through our production, or a few through our production filter as well, showing where we've matured the most. I do think that our catalog does have room to grow and utilize all the functionality. We're not quite there yet. But we have utilized the Kubernetes tab. We've created our own runway information tab with information on what squads own it, what the short names are in our CMDB, our service mesh URLs as well. If I continue on, we have used our Docs plugin quite extensively ourselves. We have a few other teams that have started using the documentation section in addition to ourselves. We've contributed a little bit back to the Argo CD plugin, as I've mentioned. So here's an Argo CD plugin, and you can now click on it, see some more details as well as far as what's behind that. So not only did we contribute the Argo CD backend and the scaffolding action, but we've enhanced the current offerings as well from Rody. As shown previously, we have the ability to see, whoops, I don't know where this one went. Maybe I need to refresh here for a second, but we do have the ability to see where our pods are, where our ingresses and services are throughout our environment. And in just a few minutes, I ran this before this demonstration. You can see I've got a live ingress that's available on the internet. I've hidden this particular URL at this time, but we do have an application live out there deployed through Argo CD. I do see that timing-wise, I've got a couple more things I want to touch on before I wrap up. We did see that there was a need overall to mature our hosting platform for American Airlines, to mature our DevOps practices, to mature how we're deploying things and getting things out to cloud. So we've tried to cover it all. So a lot of what we've worked towards is abstraction layers. And with Runway, we've also worked across different verticals to implement different items. For our GTM provider, our security content provider, we've had to create automation that sits inside our Kubernetes environment to distribute information about app placement. We've had to create the Kubernetes environment and use GitHub Actions and Terraform to go from 6 months of creating clusters in the past that some of our teams have experienced down to 40 minutes with our service mesh overlaid on top and full .coms ready to go. Some of our teams have stated in the past that it can take up to 4 months to launch applications into a non-production environment. And as shown here, we got this URL, maybe 6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the max. So shortening the gap from 4 months down to about 10 minutes is what we've worked towards. As mentioned with our GTM services, we've developed our own runway operator, which has been one of our big abstraction layers as well, making it easier for teams not to have to know Kubernetes. Kubernetes is really difficult. It's complex. It's insecure by default. We don't want our app teams having to worry about that at all. So we've tried to do everything we can to make things easier. And one of those abstraction layers is our runway operator and our web app YAML. One particular team with our web app YAML, they defined with their environmental variables, secrets, a few other things, they defined 41 lines of YAML. That exploded into 1,400 lines of native Kubernetes resource YAML. So we really want to abstract that away from the teams. And as we've continued down the iterative path of the operator, we've expanded the options available to teams while still implementing those same defaults, such as the GTMs and security services that must be implemented. We don't give teams a way around that. Those are automatically incorporated. Same thing with our service mesh. We don't want teams to have to get burdened with a service mesh. They don't need to worry about that if they're an application team. They just need to use it. So our operator also introduces them to the service mesh without them having to know anything about what a service mesh is or really provides at the end of the day. One thing that was brought up was plugins. We've created tons of custom plugins in the Backstage ecosystem or the Runway ecosystem. As mentioned previously by Vincenzo, the modular aspect of Backstage has been hugely popular. We did previously create a homegrown solution that I was directly part of that was modular, and it really didn't work for a few reasons that have been pointed out, but mainly it wasn't part of inner source, so it wasn't able to be worked on across the company at scale. It was something that a particular team owned, managed, maintained, and that is what we're trying not to do with Runway. In addition to the fact that all these plugins live in the Runway code base, we also have introduced what we call standalone plugins. So this is a plugin I'll show. I have a couple of minutes here. I'll try to show, but an Apogee UI for managing Apogee within Runway. This is what we call a standalone plugin. So the team manages, maintains their code separately, the review process, and any updates are published to our internal registry, which is JFrog's Artifactory, and then Dependabot through GitHub automatically pulls those down daily. So we're still allowing teams to operate independently, but plug into the powerful ecosystem that is Runway and powered by Backstage. I did want to just jump in quick to the Apogee plugin. I've got a couple different plugins here, but here's that Apogee UI plugin. That's a standalone plugin. It still looks like Runway, still has the same flavor, same theme and everything, but they don't have to abide by any of our review processes. It's made it much easier, and it's lessened the burden on our team for reviews as well. We do have other plugins that teams have contributed all around American Airlines for managing items in Rancher, for figuring out, in this case, who just created this plugin, maybe an email address for that user as well. Continuing down, our data and engineering team have created really powerful plugins for data ingestion, for data lake access, various different data and engineering items, and then our inner source marketplace as well, being able to find those common patterns across American Airlines where teams can contribute and consume as well. You'll see Runway is pretty high up there, along with a few of the other platforms we manage. We do connect into VMware's VRA as well for where needed for more legacy infrastructure options. And we face many, many challenges along the way as far as being early adopters, again, not having the specific skill sets in React and TypeScript. We've had lots of different snowflakes where every team likes to operate differently, and trying to standardize and make teams work more cohesively together has been a big challenge, and then just generally open source at American Airlines as well. So I hope all this has been helpful, and you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect and learn more. I think that pretty much does it for my time. Hopefully there's a question or two.
Thank you, Carl. Let's thank Carl first. Let's give it a round of applause for Carl. All right. We have time for one question. Yeah, just gonna.
Hi there. with the scripts that you may have already had in place to generate the different applications and services, how did you go about implementing those in Backstage? Did you just put them all in lump sum, or did you have to break them into UI components, etc.? How did you go about that migration into Backstage?
Good question. So originally we used Yeoman. When Backstage first started, they used Cookie Cutter in order to template out the applications. So it was pretty easy to move from a CLI type application to a cookie cutter templating system. It was just swapping out the variable replacement for the most part and maybe some template files. And the Backstage system at the time still allowed you to define the templates pretty simply using a YAML file as far as the inputs required. And now it's gotten a lot more powerful. So I would say that the original templates we had still exist in some form. It's just changed from Yeoman to Cookie Cutter now to Nunchucks.
All right.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you for that, Carl. And let's give it another round of applause. And finally, we have a final talk from Tiago. So I'll let Tiago come to the stage. This is the first hybrid event that we've been doing, so it's always nice to finish with a personal touch, I guess. So, Tiago Ferreira.
Okay, perfect. So just give me a couple of seconds to know where my mouse is. Okay, right there. Now, okay. Is it me, the mic? Okay. Okay, sorry. So yeah, let's then start on my side. So first of all, thank you all for coming. I hope you guys are all having a very good time and learn a little bit more about Backstage and feel excited as I am about trying new things about Backstage. So I know that I'm sorry for being the last one. It's always grateful being the last one. I'm the only guy standing between you and another beer. So just hold on for a little bit more, and in a couple of minutes we'll be all drinking a couple of beers. But before that, let me just tell you how we use Backstage at Reviewpad in order to start with a clean house. Please have in mind that Reviewpad is a startup, is 2 years old, so we don't have that kind of huge bump Backstage, but I'm sure we are going to get there someday. So I'm Tiago. A software engineer at Reviewpad. I've been working at Reviewpad for a couple of years, and hope to do so in the next times. But yeah, let's focus on what is more important right now. So I will start telling you a little bit about Reviewpad. So what we do at Reviewpad, the reason why we decided to use Backstage. And then show you a little bit how Backstage can be customized. Thank you for that. Customized, but and I will show a little bit of code so you guys can see how easy it is to put something inside Backstage and bring that home with you. So at Reviewpad, we are on a mission on change how code reviews are done, okay? And what I mean by that is especially trying to understand how to improve code reviews and how to improve that process in a way to make it more efficient and in some cases even more useful. Unfortunately, code reviews are a little bit like I like to compare them with the cookies from a website. So you need to accept them in order to access to something, but no one wants to deal with them. They are just there. And at Reviewpad, we want to change that. So now that we know a little bit about Reviewpad, we will know more in the next minutes. So let me tell you that starting something even from scratch is not as easy as just having a small folder. It takes a lot of time, so you need to iterate a lot of times, you need to fail a lot of times, you need to try new things. And what we see here is not actually the reality. We end up with something more similar like this, which is a pretty huge nightmare. And the exercise that I want you guys to do right now is try to imagine that each one of these images or each one of these pictures is actually, let's imagine a microservice that we have in our company, or a website, or some documentation, or some other component that we found that is useful for the company to function. And after some time, it starts to get harder to understand what each component does, how do they relate with each other, and who's the owner of that component. Okay, and that's where actually Backstage comes into place. Okay, so as a developer portal, it can help us a lot to, as you guys saw, bring all this mess into one place and categorize everything according to the way the company organized that information. And by mess, what I mean is just a bunch of components, a bunch of tools, documentation, microservice, whatever you guys have at your companies. And we all know that if you have an organized house or home, whatever you want to call it, it'll be easier to ship faster and with higher quality. And also make onboarding a little bit easier. So having said that, and now that we know a little bit about Reviewpad and Backstage, we know way more about Backstage thanks to these guys than Reviewpad. I want to explore now how we go from nothing to having a Backstage. So what kind of directions we took at the Reviewpad in order to have the Backstage we have right now, and now we intend to improve on top of that. So the first thing we do was identify what were the components. By components, I mean everything that belongs to Reviewpad, everything that actually makes Reviewpad what Reviewpad is now. It can be a website like reviewpad.com, a service like we have Atlas over there, an application, documentation, or any other tool. So once we find out what these components are, the second thing we need to do that we did was understand what are the relations between these components. So what do these components do? How do they relate with each other? And who is responsible for those components? Okay. And once we have all this information and all these thoughts organized, which can be a lot easier for a company which is smaller than from someone like Spotify or American Airlines, as I can imagine. I think it was Levy that mentioned that they had more than 4,000 microservices. So I cannot even imagine 4,000. Actually, show a picture of those 4,000 components in there. So it was not a pleasing picture. Anyway, after we have all that, we can start building our Backstage portal. And this is just an example of the Reviewpad portal. As you can see, we didn't innovate a lot on the UI. We focus more on having all these components well documented and all in just one single place. So and the thing is, how do we can create a new component right now? So you can program the create component button like the guys from American Airlines, Spotify, and Zalando did, or you can just go directly in each repo and add a YAML file in there. And Backstage will go and read that YAML file and understand, okay, this is a component. This needs to be back on the Backstage. Okay, so talking with Backstage is a very simple YAML file on the repo, and here's an example. So one of our components, the Atlas app, the one that we're talking right now, has a name, has a description. We can also add more stuff to it, like we have a couple of links that will help who wants to know more where they can go. In our case, we use this for our environmentals. And then we have the specification, if it is an application, if it is in production, and who owns it. Nothing that you guys already don't know at this stage. And This YAML file goes into the repo, and then you have to configure Backstage to tell them you need to go in all these repos and read all these. The YAML file is called catalog /info, if I'm not mistaken, and Backstage will read all these YAML files and bring into the portal wherever you want it to build. So that example that I just showed you is that line over there. Okay, the name Atlas app, which is owned by the engineering team, which is an application which actually lives in production, and then the description that you guys just saw. Does that make sense so far? Okay, perfect. So next step, we just saw how to configure or how to include our components into Backstage. I want to share with you a little bit how Backstage can actually be customizable. Okay, maybe I should have chosen a better word for that. Anyway, I will use an example, and you can guess in what subject I'm going to use it. And if you guys thought about code reviews, that was the correct answer. So I'm going to use an example how we can customize how did we customize our Backstage using the code reviews perspective. And at Reviewpad, what we focus on code reviews, and we try to help teams to be more efficient at code reviews. But before doing that, we first need to understand where those teams are, what are those pains, and how we can improve those pains, okay? And in order to do that in a more automatically way and efficient way, we actually developed a tool that we called X-Ray. The naming is very simple. So you are X-Ray. What it does, it goes to your repo, takes an X-ray to your pull requests, and analyze all that data in order to understand how long how long does it take, for instance, to merge a pull request into master, and then go a little bit deeper and understand things like how long does it take to do the first review and all that stuff. So break down that time into small time so we can better understand. But better than just be talking about X-ray, I will show you X-ray. So bear on with me. There you go. But actually, I don't know if I start sharing my... Did I share my screen with you guys? I don't think so. I'm such a bad presenter. Give me just a second. Am I sharing my screen? Sorry for this mess, guys. This one, right? I'm really sorry for this. To the system. Oh. Okay. Okay. So let's move on. So we're talking about X-ray. So here's the first page of X-ray. So X-ray brings some metrics. Right now we just give some support to GitHub. Okay. So in this, what we do right here, just put the URL that we want to take an X-ray to see how the team stands with their pull request. If you want to do it a private repo, you can still do it by just providing the GitHub token that you can generate on GitHub. Not a problem. For this, we are going to use a public GitHub repository. Sorry for that. There we go. I want to use source graph. Okay, I'll just move this thing away. There you go. So right now what you're doing is going to the source graph repository, look into the last 15 pull requests, understand how long does it take for the source graph team to merge those pull requests into master. Okay. we can see that the source graph numbers are actually very, very good. So usually the merge time, so the time that since a pull request is open until it goes into master, it takes around 8 hours, 37 minutes, which is pretty good. And if you want to go into a bit of detail on that, you will see that for as soon as the pull request is open, it takes around 3 hours for the first review, around 5 hours for the first approval, and then the first approval usually ends up to be the last one, but we have a few minutes here, and then the time it takes to merge. Also, the size of the last 50 pull requests are on average around 100 lines, which is pretty good. And then we can see one thing which is quite amazing. So there's no pull requests that don't have a review, which is pretty good. So I need to talk to these guys to congratulate them. So this is X-Ray. This was just to show you a little bit about what we do at Reviewpad. And right now what I wanted to show you, what I wanted to share with you actually is so the Backstage. So we have Backstage on this side and we have X-Ray on the other side. How can we put X-Ray inside the Backstage in a way that makes sense for our example, okay? So let's imagine that I want to do it in here, the Atlas app, okay? So as you can see, we are on the components. We are on Atlas app, which is an application. I will just click it, and we want to add X-Ray here. So it's already there, but I will go through the steps, okay? So, and we do that going to open the Backstage source code. So we don't want to change the backend, just the front end to put a new tab in there. Okay, that's what we are going to do. We want to change the components, especially the catalog, which only has very simple an entity page, so it should be quite easier. So if you look here, you'll see a switch case for everything, all the entities that Backstage has. In our case, we just want to go to the component page and change that. So I'll just navigate there, go to definition. There we go. So in our case, if you go here, we are talking about an application and not a service. And according to what I have here, application will go to the default. I don't want to go to the default. I want because in some cases the default, for instance, a website goes to the default, or some documentation goes to the default, and it doesn't make sense to apply X-Ray to those kind of examples. So let's just create another switch case and say that this switch case is going to apply to the application. Okay, that's it. And for simplicity, we are going to show the same that we show on service. Okay. So, which means that we want to change the service entity page. So, definition. There we go. What we are seeing here is just the routing, okay? Overview, CI/CD, API, which exactly matches what we have here. So, if you want to add X-Ray as the second tab, for instance, then it means that we need to add a new router right here. And what we want to have inside that router, it's just the X-Ray results, okay? So what is an X-Ray result? It's just a React application, not a React application, I'm overreacting here. Just a component which is very, very simple, okay? So what we did in order to make this very, very fast demo was to use an iframe, okay? That's like a shortcut to showing things working. But the main goal here is to show how Backstage gives you a lot of things from scratch, okay? So we'll use entity to get our information. So what is an entity? This is an entity, okay? So the YAML that we saw in the beginning, that's what Spotify defines as an entity. And if you look closer, there's some metadata here, some annotations, and some github.com project slug, which is exactly what we need in order to know which repository we want to query. So we know where our data is. So let's go back to our code. We have our entity. we go to our metadata and we extract the GitHub project slug. We have our slug, we encode the link, and we are done with the link. Okay, so that's one thing we have. We could work with this. Okay, but in order to make it more challenging and to show you another thing that the Backstage does for you, we decided to apply X-ray to private repos, and for that you need to be authenticated. We need a token. So what do? We just say to Backstage, please use the GitHub authentication API that I have configured in the beginning. So I didn't show you how. Sorry, I didn't show you how to do that, but you have all the documentation on the Backstage. Maybe we should try the other mic. Not sure if it is the mic. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what do? So this is already configured from. We did it before coming here, but that's not the point. The point we just ask Backstage to use the configuration that someone did. Let's assume that this is done, and then we just ask for an access token for the repo and with user permission, and we get our access token. We have now our link and our access token. We can easily just do a query to our X-ray, putting the repository and the token. So we are passing the token here as a query parameter, but please don't do that. Just for the demo's purpose, okay? Even if you try to do it here, it will not go into the URL. So don't be afraid of trying it. We don't even keep your token. We just use it for requesting the information from GitHub. Yeah, so let's try X-ray. This repository is a bit heavy, and you guys will see why. So this is one of our applications, and right now what you are doing is scanning all the last 50 pull requests, understand all those numbers. If you remember the numbers from SourceGraph, you'll see that they have a very good number of 12 hours, which is pretty good. But if you see the numbers of Atlas App on the X-ray, so first thing, so my time is that was me. Just let me know that my time is done. Sorry for that. So first of all, it works having X-ray on Backstage, and that was very, very simple. Yeah, our times here are not very good, so 65 hours to merge a pull request. That's a huge amount of time, but this is not all bad news. We also have, just out of curiosity, we also have a project here, which is a project we are applying some new developments that we are doing at code review in order to make the process more efficient. And if you see these numbers actually change. I won't say a little bit because I'll say quite much. I will not go into detail how we did that, but of course, if you have that curiosity, please reach out to us. But the idea was just to show you first how we use Backstage, how we put it X-ray in there, and how easy it is to actually do it on your company. And that's pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or any question at all, just feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiago. So I think we have time for maybe one question. Go ahead.
Hi, Tiago. I've never written a Backstage plugin, but it seems like in your example you were actually forking Backstage and not actually writing a plugin.
No, I was not writing a plugin. So what we did, we have our own instance of Backstage. So let's say a fork of Backstage, and we didn't do a plugin. We just do a new tab on the plugin that was there. The plugin that you were seeing was actually the catalog plugin.
Okay, so I get it.
That's a plugin.
Then my question is that how it's typically it's typically done? Because it sounds a bit weird. Because then, like if Backstage upstream changes their routing, you're going to have conflicts.
Yeah. That's one of the things we need to keep in mind. But the idea here was because we want to have X-ray running for each component itself, and not having it at the plugin and then have to choose the component. But we could do it the other way around. It will make sense actually to provide X-ray as a plugin, and then you choose, okay, I want to run this in which project of my company. That will be better for a plugin. But to be honest with you, that way is way fast for us to provide a demo. Maybe that was the main reason for doing it.
I can answer this question if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so yes, that's true. You don't have to fork the repository, and don't do it. We don't recommend. So to bootstrap your Backstage application, there is a specific CLI tool called @backstage/create_app. So it's like basically similar to what React does with the React Create app. So by running that, you basically get a new scaffold like monorepo with, and you get all the repositories linked to your application. So that's the proper way to do that.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone has more questions? If not, I would like to thank everyone for coming, and thanks for our speakers. It was really nice to do this first edition. We are looking for feedback on just the meetup, and also obviously, we are, X-ray or anything about code reviews that you might want to talk about with us. We have some QR codes to join our Discord, and also get a T-shirt if you're interested. And that's it. So I hope that we can get some feedback and do this more often, and get this community of developers in Porto more engaged, and make their lives better. Thanks again for joining, and let's thank our speakers once more.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry you guys cannot join on the beers, but anyway, it was really nice to meet you and to listen to all your presentations. And yeah, good luck. Carl, good luck with your airplane.
Got to get back to the cockpit. Got to fly this thing and get onto the ground.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. I'll just put if you guys want to give some feedback, I'll just put the QR code here if you want to take a picture and access the